On Christmas Eve, the restaurant glowed like a jewel box turned inside out. Golden light spilled from crystal chandeliers, catching on polished glassware and polished smiles. Every surface shimmered with intention. This was not a place for accidents, not a night for mistakes. Alexandra Vale stepped inside, every inch the CEO she had trained herself to be, back straight, expression composed, heels striking marble with confidence sharpened by years of boardroom warfare. In her left hand, she held her daughters. Matilda was 8 years old and already exhausted. She clutched her stuffed bear with white-knuckled intensity, as if the soft, threadbare toy were the only thing keeping her anchored. The noise hit her first, not as sound but as vibration. Laughter thundered through the floor. Glasses clinked. Music hummed through speakers too loud, too layered, too wrong. Her hearing aids tried valiantly to make sense of it all and failed, feeding her a distorted storm of half-noises and static. Around them, investors greeted one another with booming enthusiasm. Mouths opened wide in laughter. Words flew, sharp and fast. To Matilda, it all looked like chaos. Faces moving without meaning. Emotion she had to guess at, energy she could not translate. Alexandra squeezed her daughter's hand and bent down, lowering her voice instinctively even though she knew it didn't help. "It's okay," she said, brushing Matilda's hair back. "Just stay close to me." Matilda nodded, because nodding was easier than explaining that it didn't feel okay, that it never felt okay in rooms like this. Before Alexandra could say more, a hand appeared in front of her, a firm handshake, another investor, another smile. "Alexandra, so good to see you." She straightened immediately, professionalism snapping into place. She released Matilda's hand for just a moment, just long enough to greet someone who could decide her future. When she turned back, the chair beside her was empty. Her heart stuttered. Then she saw her. Matilda stood several feet away, no longer frozen or withdrawn. A man in a maintenance uniform knelt in front of her, his movements slow and careful. His hands were raised, not threatening, not rushed, but deliberate, and Matilda laughed. The sound was small, light, and utterly unguarded. It sliced through Alexandra like glass. Because Matilda never laughed like that here. Alexandra Vale was the CEO of a tech finance conglomerate worth billions, a woman who had clawed her way up through industries that ate hesitation for breakfast. Tonight was the most important night of her career. One investment deal, one vote. If it closed, she kept control of the company she had built from nothing. If it failed, the board would invoke the contingency clause and remove her, quietly, efficiently, permanently. She had prepared for this evening the way she prepared for everything. Strategy memos, contingency plans, talking points refined to surgical precision. She had not prepared for the sight of her daughter, smiling at a stranger. Alexandra loved Matilda with a ferocity that frightened her sometimes. But love, she had learned, was not the same as understanding. She had approached motherhood like a corporate acquisition. The best specialists, the best technology, the best schedules. Therapists booked months in advance. Hearing aids upgraded as soon as newer models appeared. Every box checked. But there was one thing she had never truly done. She had never learned her daughter's language. Matilda had been deaf since birth. Sound had never been part of her world. Instead, she lived through sight and touch, through expressions and patterns in hands. She learned to read lips before most children learn to read books. She learned early that people grew uncomfortable when conversations slowed down for her, that eyes slid past her, that attention drifted elsewhere. Most painfully, she noticed how often her mother's focus fractured, always pulled toward emails, calls, crises waiting just beyond the moment. Matilda knew she complicated things. In rooms like this, full of important people and fragile egos, she was a variable no one wanted, the problem that didn't fit the script. So she learned to shrink, to sit quietly, to hold her bear and wait. Tonight, Alexandra needed her to be perfect, quiet, invisible if possible. Henry Collins was 40 years old and invisible by design. He wore a maintenance uniform that blended into walls and expectations. Clean but worn, his tool belt sat comfortably at his hip, familiar as muscle memory. He moved through the restaurant unnoticed, fixing what others never saw until it broke. He had been called in last minute for electrical and sound system checks. Christmas Eve emergencies paid overtime rates. He hadn't minded bringing his son along. Daycare was closed, and Finn was old enough to know how to stay out of the way. Finn, 10, sat on a crate in the back hallway, coloring a crooked Christmas tree. He hummed softly to himself, a habit left over from years of learning to regulate silence and sound. He was mature in the quiet way children become when life teaches them early that adults don't always have the answers. What set Henry apart from everyone else in that glittering room was simple. He knew sign language, not the novelty kind, not the awkward, half-remembered gestures taught in weekend seminars. He knew it fluently, instinctively, the kind of fluency born of necessity. Finn knew it too. For them, signing wasn't special. It was survival. It was love. The restaurant had been transformed into a cathedral of wealth. A towering Christmas tree sparkled near the entrance. Garland wrapped the railings in careful symmetry. Soft instrumental carols floated through the air, curated elegance meant to suggest warmth without sincerity. Snow fell outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, muting Manhattan into something almost gentle. Alexandra entered with Matilda, both dressed impeccably. Matilda's velvet dress itched. Her shoes were stiff. Her expression was already distant, the mask she wore when overstimulated. Hillary Dawson, head of public relations, appeared instantly, like a stage manager checking cues. "Tonight is about the script," she murmured into Alexandra's ear. Smiles, confidence, control. After 15 minutes, we'll move Matilda to a private room, less overwhelming, fewer disruptions. Alexandra nodded, because that was what she did. Corbin Hale arrived next, senior board member, silver-haired, immaculately tailored. His smile never reached his eyes. "Tonight is crucial," he said smoothly. "We need stability, unity, no surprises." Alexandra felt the familiar pressure clamp around her chest, the unspoken threat. She nodded again. The VIP table sat near the windows. Leah Mercer, the key investor, was already there, sharp-eyed, unforgiving. Matilda sat beside her mother, legs dangling. The table was too high, the noise too much. Her hearing aid screamed static. Alexandra stood to greet someone else. That was when Matilda slipped away. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply walked toward quiet. The service hallway was dimmer, calmer. Staff hurried past without noticing her. She stopped near a door marked maintenance, hugging her bear tightly. Henry saw her immediately. A child alone doesn't look lost the way adults expect. She looked like someone who had chosen exile. He approached slowly, making sure she saw him. He knelt, lowering himself to her level. He didn't speak. He signed. "Hello." Matilda froze. Then her eyes widened. Her hands trembled as she signed back. "Hello." Finn joined them, smiling easily, asking simple questions with his hands. Matilda laughed, and in that moment, unseen by most of the room, something began to change. Alexandra realized her daughter was gone less than a minute after she stepped away, but that minute stretched into something vast and terrifying. Her practiced calm fractured as she scanned the table, the room, the exits. For the first time that evening, the CEO mask slipped. Then she saw her. At the far end of the service hallway, Matilda stood between a man in a maintenance uniform and a boy about her age. The man was kneeling. His hands moved slowly, carefully. The boy signed quickly, enthusiastically. And Matilda was smiling. Not the careful smile Alexandra coached her into for cameras. Not the polite one she used when strangers leaned in too close. The smile reached her eyes. It was real. Alexandra stopped walking. She stood just out of sight, watching her daughter speak in a language she had never truly learned. Watching her daughter come alive in a way Alexandra had never seen in public. Shame bloomed hot in her chest. The man noticed her first. Henry's hands paused. He met Alexandra's eyes and, without thinking, signed something gentle and clear. She's okay. She just needed space. Alexandra didn't understand the words, only the intent. She nodded anyway. That nod, uncertain, incomplete, felt like the closest thing to communication she'd had with her daughter all evening. Hillary appeared beside her, fingers closing around Alexandra's elbow. "Leon's waiting," she whispered urgently. "We can't let personal matters derail this." For years, Alexandra would have obeyed. Tonight, something resisted. "Just a moment," Alexandra said. The interruption came fast. Otis, the restaurant manager, approached Henry with tight irritation. "You need to return to your work. This isn't appropriate." Henry rose calmly. She seemed overwhelmed. That's not your job." Corbin appeared, perfectly timed. His gaze swept the scene with calculated precision. Why is a maintenance worker interacting with the CEO's daughter? Nearby guests turned. Phones shifted. Optics sharpened. Hillary hissed, "If this gets photographed." Alexandra stepped forward. "He was helping my daughter," she said clearly. "With my permission." Silence rippled. Matilda sensed the tension. Her smile faded. Henry immediately signed reassurance, Finn stepping closer protectively. Corbin's smile thinned. "You're turning a business dinner into an emotional scene." Alexandra met his gaze. For the first time, she saw him not as an ally, but as a threat. "I'm aware," she said. They returned to the table, but the night cracked wide open. Moments later, the sound system cut out. Lights flickered. The room murmured with confusion. Matilda recoiled. The feedback from her hearing aids was sharp, painful. She covered her ears, breathing fast. Alexandra froze, helpless. Henry was already moving. In the utility room, he saw it immediately. Tampered wires. Loose connections placed deliberately. This wasn't failure. It was sabotage. He fixed it quickly, efficiently. When he returned, Matilda reached for his hand without thinking. Alexandra saw it, and something inside her broke open. She asked for a small table by the window. Then she did something unthinkable. She invited Henry and Finn to join them. 10 minutes. Snow fell outside. Inside, Matilda relaxed for the first time all night. Finn signed stories about Christmas cookies and paper snowflakes. Matilda responded eagerly. Alexandra tried to follow. Her hands were clumsy. Wrong. Backward. Matilda corrected her gently and laughed. Henry explained how he'd learned sign language. Late nights, hospital rooms. Desperation turned into devotion. "Hands can say what voices can't," he said. Matilda placed her bear in Alexandra's lap. An invitation. When Alexandra returned to the main table, chaos waited. A USB drive was missing. Security was called. Suspicion turned toward the maintenance crew. Finn stepped in front of his father. Matilda couldn't stand it. She walked into the center of the room and signed fiercely. "He helped me. He's good. He's my friend." No one understood. Alexandra knelt beside her, signing imperfectly. "I'm sorry. I should have learned." Then she stood. "If you're investing in me," Alexandra said to Lan, "you deserve to see who I am when I stop performing." Henry requested the security footage. They watched. A server, hired by Hillary, tampering with the panel. Then the coat area. Finn signed what he'd seen. The USB was found in Corbin's associate's jacket. Silence. William, Alexandra's lawyer, stepped forward with evidence. Emails. Plans. A manufacturing collapse. Corbin had tried to steal the company. Leon looked at Matilda, then at Alexandra. "A CEO who chooses her child over optics," he said, "isn't weak. She's unmovable." The deal held. Corbin was suspended. Hillary was terminated. Alexandra enrolled in real sign language classes. Every day. No shortcuts. Henry was offered real work, on respect, not pity. Weeks later, they gathered at Alexandra's home. A small tree. Paper snowflakes. Matilda hung an ornament. 2 hands reaching for each other. Alexandra signed slowly. "I love you." Matilda pulled them all together and taught them one word. Family. Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside, language finally found its way home.